You're not alone. Trinity Helix AI. Trinity AI Legal. Trinity AI Support. Trinity AI SME. Trinity AI Data and Analytics. Our mission is 0 to 80.
Trinity Helix. This is episode 9 of the actual story of the Online Safety Act and child grooming gangs and how they're all connected. And episode 9 looks squarely at how the charity sector has grown beyond all belief, from something like 18 million in the early 1990s to 102 million in the last year. In the 1990s it was about half the defence budget. Now it's double the defence budget. And basically it's the funding engine. It's full of organisations that don't have any connection with the public at all. They're sponsored by the state and by money it's sort of got from different areas, and then it's sort of like a whole infrastructure of government set out in sort of the private world that government uses to inform itself on stuff. So as you can understand, it's not surprising why the government's doing so badly when it gets up stuff like that. Good news is it opportunity for massive tens of billions of pounds of savings, fastest growing sector of all, and as you'll hear by the deathly silence, completely incapable of reporting any conflicts of interest.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've got quite a stack of material here today, all trying to tackle this this really difficult question. We see official reports, right, like the 2025 KC report. They confirm these huge institutional failures, massive human costs.
Yeah.
But why does it just keep going?
Yeah, it's perplexing. And the sources we've looked at, they converge on, well, a pretty stark answer. It's basically financial. They call it the Charity Industrial Complex, the CIC. Think of it as this enormous, like, $102 billion engine. And it runs on social failure. It actually needs it to keep going.
Okay, so the mission today is really to unpack that, the cold, hard logic, you could say, of how profit actually sustains misery.
Exactly.
And that brings us to this paradox, this really shocking idea. We talk about the cost of family breakdown, right? $51 billion a year. You assume that's a loss.
You would, yeah, a cost to the state.
But the argument here is that 51 billion pounds, it isn't really a loss in the system. It's the revenue stream.
It is the revenue stream. The state pays out, yes, but that money flows directly into the contracts held by organizations within this complex. So the breakdown is effectively their income.
Right, a kind of profitable loop. Okay, let's get into the mechanics then. How is this power, this financial capture, actually structured?
Well, first you need to look beyond the 160,000 small local charities. They're mostly not the issue here. The sources talk about a tale of two charities. And there's this defining rule, they call it the 483 financial rule.
Okay, what's that?
Get this. Just 4% of all the registered charities in the UK. They control 83% of the sector's entire income. That's 102 billion total, remember.
4% control 83%. That's
wow.
Wow. So a tiny elite minority is basically setting the agenda.
That's what the data suggests. And they're often defined by one key thing: their reliance on government funding.
Ah, so these are the type 2 charities mentioned.
Yeah.
The ones getting what, over 90% of their money from state contracts?
Exactly. And that level of dependency creates what the sources call the golden handcuffs. It fundamentally shapes what they can and can't say.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. You can actually sort of map.
Well, it doesn't. But they just, they just lose all ability. They can and they should say, but they don't. And the other thing here is it's the absolute definition of a victim culture, because what do charities need victims? So more charities equals more victims. We now got 5 times more charities than we had in the 1990s.
This silence, right, based on the funding percentage.
Yeah, there's a clear correlation. Below about 30% state funding groups like the Howard League, maybe the NSPCC, historically they seem to retain a real capacity for systemic critique. They can challenge the status quo.
But as that percentage climbs,
the pressure changes. The sources identify this specific point, the Barnardo's threshold, they call it. It sits around 57% state funding.
57%. And that's the tipping point.
Seems to be. Once you cross that threshold, the ability or maybe the willingness for independent advocacy just seems to become structurally, well, impossible. You shift focus entirely. It becomes all about collaboration, working within the existing state frameworks, even if they're failing, because that's where the contracts are.
Okay, so critique dies off and you're locked into the system.
And by the way, they are failing. There's very little there's very little evidence to show that any of it's ever worked. The way that the entire family court structure is set up, and the charity sector is now £102 billion. It's got a lot of indirect costs because it through the family court structure and Whitehall it sort of deals out pain. But over 20 years it's been in place, getting to that amount. So you can see it's not. This is where you start to ratchet up figures like £1 trillion of extra spending, money that we didn't have, but we pay interest on, by the way, for this failed ideology.
That sounds like policy being set by procurement, not by actual need or evidence.
It leads straight to what the documents call the democracy bypass. Policy gets locked in through this iron triangle.
Right, the link between Whitehall departments, the big charity contractors getting the money, and the parliamentary groups meant to oversee them.
Exactly. And that oversight mechanism itself can be compromised. Exhibit C in the source material is pretty damning here. It documents how the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Children, the APPG, that's supposed to be providing scrutiny, is actually run by a major service contractor, the National Children's Bureau, the NCB.
Wait, the group being overseen is running the oversight committee.
That's regulatory capture, textbook style. It raises huge questions about genuine accountability.
Okay, this paints a really bleak picture. This system isn't just failing. It seems almost designed to perpetuate the problems it claims to solve. Which brings us to the core business model, the perverse incentive.
Right. The argument is the model isn't optimized for solving social problems. It's optimized for managing them. Managing them ensures continued funding. Look at the domestic abuse sector case study presented. There's data showing a direct link. When metrics associated with family breakdown go up, things like non-molestation orders.
The funding for the sector also goes up.
Precisely. More reported problems equals perceived higher demand, which equals bigger government contracts.
The domestic abuse is now something like a £500 million industry, employing tens of thousands of people. And it's grown from that. Not to say that people don't have domestic, of course people have domestic abuse. But the vast bulk of it is just by one person saying something that no one will know the answer to because it's a private conversation.
The solution effectively thrives on the persistence, even the growth of the problem.
So failure is rewarded financially. It ensures a growing market for these contracted services.
Wow. So thinking about what this means for you, the listener, it suggests that the voice of civil society, you often hear the one advising government featured in the media. It might often be the state-sanctioned voice, the voice of the most compliant, the most financially dependent organizations, not necessarily the ones pushing for fundamental change.
And the system has mechanisms.
Although there are ones doing that, I mean, they've completely lost the plot. They're pushing for more funding all the time. Although, you know, most of it's just made up. It's incredible, really.
To protect itself.
Right.
Evidence that challenges this profitable narrative gets suppressed. The PC precedent is mentioned as a key example.
Yeah, the effort to silence Erin Pizzi back in the day when her research on domestic violence didn't fit the emerging and ultimately more lucrative narrative, it shows an early intolerance for inconvenient truths.
It's a powerful silencing effect.
Which leaves us and you with a really crucial question to think about. If the entire financial model of some of the UK's...
So I found this lady by accident, Erin Pizzi. She formed the first women's shelter, refuge against domestic abuse in, I think it was Hammersmith or Fulham in 1971. And she was the pioneer, she was the goat. She kind of wrote the playbook. But she started getting into trouble with the women's liberation movement at that time. When she started coming out and saying that actually the relationships that she'd observed were complex, and that it's something like 60% of the time the women were at least as violent as the men, having themselves come from violent and abusive childhoods. Why this is now hard to understand. But guess what happened to her? She was attacked. Like, I don't think in modern history I can think of anyone that's, maybe Salman Rushdie. She had to leave her work because she was threatened violently. She was sent death threats. She was told that she was going to have bombs sent to her refuge where she worked, the place she founded. She had to have police protection, and in the end she had to leave the country for fear of her life. So she sort of made her own point in a strange way. I mean, it's like, where did that come from? Talk about anger. And she's been subsequently deleted from the records, and you can't help but think they had even by her own charity. She was awarded an MBE in 2024. Actually, and there's some timing about that. There's a bit of a nod, but basically she's got this sort of odd background that people make out, but it's not odd at all. What was odd was what was done to her. Okay, thank you.
Biggest, most influential charities fundamentally relies on social problems continuing or even getting worse. Have they structurally become part of the very problem they were originally set up to alleviate? Something to definitely mull over.
You're not alone. Trinity Helix AI. Trinity AI Legal. Trinity AI Support. Trinity AI SME. Trinity AI Data and Analytics. Our mission is 0 to 80.